The first scholar presenting is Chris Rose, who has a John Oldacre Scholarship. He's going to talk about the concrete cow. What do I mean by that? Anaerobic digestion. And when it goes wrong, it's the smelly stuff. Chris says he's an anaerobic digestion enthusiast, in fact, obsessive. He works for AB Agri as an AD technical specialist, as well as running his own property development and rental business in East Anglia with his partner Eleanor. When he wants to get away, he enjoys kite surfing on the North Norfolk coast and mountain biking on the Thetford Forest Trail. Good Norfolk. His topic focuses on anaerobic digestion, maximizing the outputs and reducing reliance on government subsidies, and explores how the UK biogas industry can survive and perhaps even thrive in the future without direct government subsidies to support it. Chris, the floor is yours.
Firstly, I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude to the John Oldacre Foundation and the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust in putting their faith in me to investigate something I feel so passionately about. It's been truly an amazing experience to travel the world and investigate my topic, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's helped me along the way. In June 2019, the UK became the first major world economy to set a target for achieving net zero on greenhouse gas emissions into law, with then Prime Minister Theresa May committing the UK to net zero by 2050. The NFU also followed this later on in the year by announcing their ambitions to see net zero for agriculture by 2040. Yet the UK biogas sector is stagnated and could even be said to be in decline. The construction of new biogas plants was heavily reliant on subsidies which have reduced over and over again. However, AD presents multiple benefits at global, national levels. UK AD sector, though, is not without its share of controversy, challenges, and its longevity is under threat. Back in 2014-15, over 70 AD plants were being built every year. This year, only around 15 to 20 are under development. So, UK agriculture has clearly got a role to play in achieving net zero, and I think AD could have a key role in helping here. So I wanted to find out on my travels what we were doing wrong. So I grew up in the dairy farming regions of Shropshire. But after going off to university, I stumbled into the rapidly growing research area of anaerobic digestion at Cranfield University on the outskirts of Milton Keynes. Now, Milton Keynes is much more famous for its roundabouts and concrete cows, but this was quite apt because anaerobic digestion in its most simplest form is referred to as a concrete cow. Concrete cow in the decomposition of organic material in an oxygen-free environment to create methane gas, just like in the rumen. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on the biology process, the fundamentals, the ins and outs of anaerobic digestion. But what we need to know is that anaerobic digestion essentially produces methane gas. Now, this gas can be used in a combined heat and power engine to produce electricity and heat, or the gas can be cleaned up. The impurities taken out, the CO2 separated and used, and the methane injected into our national gas grid. So in addition to these main AD products, there's also the digestate, the residual material, which is high in nitrogen fertilizer. So I was looking for an AD model to take advantages of all these multiple products created. I imagined a world of an AD that required no government or financial support, something that did not compete with agricultural markets, something that wasn't going to push up the price of feed into animal feed markets and take away valuable land production. I wanted something that was a net negative sink of carbon, and by this I mean taking avoidable methane emissions currently going to landfill or in other forms and taking and harnessing these. I wanted something that would offset the unavoidable carbon costs of food production. But most importantly, we need to have a good, sustainable return on investment and a model for farmers and small, medium enterprises. So too good to be true, perhaps, but definitely worth investigating. So I set off my travels in 2018, 2019, visiting a wide range of countries that were heavily subsidised, countries that had no subsidisation at all, and then somewhere in the middle with some loose incentives. So I started my investigation in Germany. Now, the German biogas market is very similar to that of the UK, except a great deal bigger, but also 5 years ahead on the curve in terms of where they're at in the industry. So by this, I mean that their subsidies, 20-year commitments by the then German government, are starting to come to an end. And the German government is increasingly moving towards unsubsidized, market-driven energy production. Now, the fragility of using energy-grown crops as an AD feedstock became apparent very early on in my visit to Eastern Germany in the late summer of 2018. Growers had been hit by severe spring and summer droughts. Some maize crops were completely written off, and several AD plants I visited described how they'd in effect put their digesters to sleep. They simply couldn't afford the feed to put in there. Forage maize prices upwards of €70 a tonne. The model no longer worked. So this reliance on energy-grown crops showed a key fragility of the system, and it scared me in that in one of the most heavily subsidised AD markets, the model simply still did not work on occasions. Not a great sign for the future. And this was a similar situation in other crop-fed plants across Europe where subsidies were in place. Time after time, farmers, landowners, operators said how the model without subsidies would simply not be viable. Wholesale electricity gas prices were simply not there yet. Something that also became apparent visiting heavily subsidised nations was that the feed hierarchy, i.e. the best use of waste and food as a resource, was being disrupted. No longer was food going to the right place. Animal feed prices were being pushed up, land prices were being pushed up. Good quality crops and good quality land should be used to feed people, animals. Anaerobic digestion should be much lower down the feed hierarchy, of course above composting, landfill, incineration. But this was causing resentment in a lot of countries and giving AD a bad name. Indeed, it was clear then countries approaching the end of their subsidisation, or AD plants that were starting with very little or nothing subsidies, were doing so using wastes, residues, byproducts. Countries such as Sweden, where the emphasis has always been around waste products, were particularly successful. But I found myself thinking, is this enough without either direct government support or local authority support to have a model based on waste? It seemed to me, at a certain degree, not. There always seemed something more to the decent business models, the sustainable models out there. And this leads me to my point around stakeholder collaboration. Now, global food producers, of which many of us here are part of the supply chain, are all scratching their heads about how they're going to reach net zero emissions and net zero waste. Achieving these aims is going to be very expensive, and solutions will need to be found other than simply in buying in carbon credits from abroad. Now, most of the successful businesses I met always involved a degree of collaboration. Working alongside a nearby business that requires the source of renewable electricity, gas, heat, the nutrients, the carbon dioxide, was an absolute essential. And it's preferable to have these businesses with a real stake in the digester itself. So can these large corporations step in and help fill that gap that subsidies once filled? It seemed to me that they can and they are already doing this to a certain degree. And it's about engaging with them and making sure that everybody profits in this situation. So additional subsidy replacing revenue is also likely to come in the form of companies and food producers needing to decarbonise their heat and their road transport. Now, this is something that was especially getting momentum in Sweden. But for instance, in the UK, 85% of our domestic heating comes from gas. Furthermore, it provides 50% of our cooking needs in commercial and household premises. But for the UK to decarbonise our heat, our cooking, the use of methane as a direct replacement is one of the most simplest and easiest ways. Imagine the upheaval of replacing every gas boiler in our homes in the UK to electric. Simply replacing gas using our existing infrastructure is surely the way forward. Methane is also key for decarbonising road transport, which in the UK accounts for approximately 25% of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, I know electric cars, electric buses are likely the future, but the problems that heavy goods vehicles face around range and power have still not been solved. It's again clear that HGV transport needs decarbonising, and gas can play a key role here, especially in agriculture, where we see so many 29-ton grain lorries moving around the country. So it must be recognised that AD cannot and will not replace all other forms of energy generation. However, the production of biomethane has multifaceted benefits. AD should not just be seen as another form of electricity production like wind or solar. It is a multiple product creator. It creates CO2, nutrients, heat. But the key things I want you to take away today is that purpose-grown energy crops in AD does have its limitations without substantial support. A model based around waste, byproducts and residues not suitable for human and animal consumption is likely to be the future. But of course, this is heavily location dependent on getting these materials. AD can have a key role to play in helping to decarbonise our heating and our heavy goods vehicle transport. We must embrace and capitalise on these key USPs that gas brings over electricity. And collaboration with big stakeholders looking to meet their targets is absolutely essential. Gas, electricity, heat production is no longer an industry exclusive for the massive corporations like EDF, Shell, BP. There is a clear opportunity demonstrated by businesses, countries around the world for smaller, medium enterprises, of which farming enterprises are the absolute best place as we know nutrition as an industry. Farming enterprises can and could get involved and look to partner with these larger corporations and help them meet their carbon reduction targets by 2050. And in doing so, I think as an AD industry, we'll be well rewarded. Thank you very much.